Revealed, the sinister rules to survive a haunted night shift in a Calgary warehouse. As Amy pushed through the heavy doors of the seemingly abandoned warehouse, the air thickened with an electric charge. The worn metal creaked ominously, as if warning her against the shadows lurking within. The dull hum of fluorescent lights flickered above, casting erratic beams that danced along rusted shelves. Every childhood tale her grandmother told her about monsters in the dark flooded her mind, igniting an old fear deep in her gut. She shook her head, forcing herself to focus. She couldn't let her son down, she needed this shift. The first hour rolled by smoothly. Amy methodically checked inventory, moving boxes and organizing clutter while trying to suppress the creeping nervousness. The big empty space felt like a void, but she focused on the monotony, hoping it would be her salvation. Just as she began to relax, a sudden crash echoed from the back of the warehouse, slicing through her fragile calm. Heart racing, she halted, torn between fleeing and seeking an explanation for the noise. Cursing herself for being paranoid, she crept towards the sound, each step heavy with dread. That was when she noticed the notes pinned to a splintered wooden beam. The first read, "Do not follow the sounds." Some primal instinct screamed at her to turn back, but she couldn't help herself. The following notes were just as bone-chilling: "Trust no one but yourself, if you hear whispers, run." Each message felt like a sepulchral breath echoing from the darkened corners of the warehouse, each line a desperate plea from those who vanished behind these walls. As dread coiled tighter around her heart, whispers began swirling through the air, chilling her to the bone. They were soft at first, teasing her insecurities as a single mother. Shadows danced more wickedly, stretching toward her. Thoughts spiraled. Was she losing it? Just then, she felt a hot prickling on the back of her neck, a sense that something or someone was watching. Intent on proving to herself that it was only her imagination, she reached for her phone, desperate to contact her neighbors for consolation, but the responses chilled her blood. Calls went unanswered, texts returned cryptic as if they were coded warnings. "You have to be careful," echoed one reply, "they know you're there." Panic surged through her like ice water. Just a tired mother, she scoffed aloud, though she felt them scoffing right back. The local authorities had dismissed her fears with condescending smirks. They didn't understand. They had no idea what lurked inside these four walls. The warehouse pulses with an insidious energy, closing in on her. As dread piled on dread, she took a shaky breath, pushing down the urge to scream. The whispers crescendoed into a haunting chorus, each voice melding into an unmistakable call: "Do not turn your back on the darkness." The lights overhead pulsed like a sinking heartbeat. Then she saw it, a shifting silhouette gliding through the dim space. Energy like a predator rippled from it, wrapping around her spine. In a frantic scramble, she backed toward the cellar door, those chilling rules pressing on her mind. But the door creaked open behind her, impossibly inviting, swirling with shadows on the threshold. "Who can I trust?" she murmured, knowing the enemy wasn't just the darkness. The closer it got, the more her instincts screamed for escape. The brilliant flashes of fluorescent light pulsed once more, and all at once, she couldn't breathe. What awaited her in those pitch-black corners? What hungered for her fear? Would she surrender to it, or could she begin to fight back when everything around her whispered otherwise? As the door creaked open, a cold draft slithered into the warehouse, intertwining with the whispers that still clawed at her sanity. Amy's heart drummed a frantic rhythm against her chest, both luring her toward the obscure entrance and warning her to flee. The silhouette was still there, lurking, its form indistinguishable in the failing light, but its presence felt like a heavy hand pressing down on her. "Get a grip." She hissed at herself, but terror tangled her thoughts into a chaotic tangle. She peered into the darkness, debating whether the cellar could hold safety or only deeper horror. The whispers seemed to edge her closer, drawing her with promises of answers, but every instinct in her screamed to remain where the light flickered, where it might still protect her. "Amy," the voice was soft, almost tender, yet wrapped in shadow. It wasn't her own. This voice felt hollow, a desperate echo beneath layers of longing. It's safe. Against her better judgment, she stepped closer to the inviting darkness of the cellar. In doing so, she felt as if she were crossing an unforgiving threshold between realms. Shadows twisted with the tendrils of her breath, inviting and forbidding at once. The urgency of survival clashed with a strange allure, a promise that perhaps, just this once, she could carve out an escape from her relentless solitude. Do not trust it. She recoiled at the sound of her own voice a plea. Suddenly, a piercing scream erupted from the shadows, splintering her resolve like brittle glass. It wasn't human. It reverberated deep within the walls, suffocating and agonizing. Panic rushed back in, seizing her throat. Without paying attention to the noise, she bolted toward the nearest exit. The fluorescent lights buckled above her, sputtering violently as if struggling between the worlds of light and darkness. The unbearable chorus of whispers escalated into frantic warnings. "Run!" they cried, reverberating in her mind. Just as she reached the front of the warehouse, the door slammed shut with a deafening thud. Amy stumbled back, eyes wide with fear, the echo of the closing door swallowing her despair. Strong breaths filled the air, each one tainted with a chilling portent. She could feel the shadows creeping closer. "No! No!" she shouted, pounding on the door, the panic rising like a brutal tide. Each pounding echoed like a heartbeat drowned in chaos. The air thickened, twisting around her. "Where are you? Help!" But her cries felt futile, muffled within the growing storm of darkness surrounding her. Then she noticed the back wall shimmered with a faint reflection, oddly out of place in the murky haze of the warehouse. A mirror. So unfamiliar. It beckoned her, an impossible object in this place of terror, compelled by a force she couldn't control. Amy approached it, every step feeling like a descent into madness. The surface shimmered, rippling as if it were alive. Her own face stared back at her, yet there was something else, a silhouette flickering behind her, with eyes that glowed like embers in the night. She spun around, but the space remained empty, taunting her with its silence. The reflection snickered softly, a cruel imitation of her fear. Words danced at the edge of her mind, the realization that whatever lived here wouldn't let her go. The warehouse cradled secrets older than she could imagine. Its shadows knew her name, her fears, the deepest corners of her past. The door remained shut, but the whispers grew louder, more chaotic. "Join us," they beckoned, promising what she longed to understand but warned of the cost. With shaky breaths, she whispered a question into the abyss: "What do you want from me?" The shadows hesitated, as if caught off guard by her defiance. And then came the response, a chilling laughter that sent frozen rivulets coursing down her spine. Amy's heart thundered as she prepared for the worst, hoping the answer would not seal her fate. But deep down, she feared she already knew. What if they were not alone? What if there were others, lost souls too deep within the haunted grasp of this place? Would she be another whisper, another flicker trapped forever in the fabric of darkness? As she stood, facing the mirror of reflections, the lights above dimmed further, plunging her into dense shadows. In that moment, she realized this was just the beginning of something far worse than she could have imagined. Amy's breath quickened as the laughter faded, leaving behind an oppressive silence that felt almost tangible. The curtain of darkness draped over her, stifling and heavy. The air remained thick with malevolence, each pulse of her heart echoing like a drum in the deadened quiet. The mirror's surface trembled again, and she caught a flicker of movement at its edge. "Get out!" she shouted, the noise tearing through the stillness. But the walls absorbed her voice, laughing at her desperation. She turned to the shadowy backdrop of the warehouse, but the familiar shapes warped and twisted into nightmarish forms. Every crate appeared like a hulking beast, inanimate yet looming, and the whispers returned, this time as a cacophony of agonized cries. "Join us." "No," she retorted, but her voice felt weak, drained of conviction. Panic flooded her, threatening to drown her sanity. The chilling realization struck her: she was the prey, the hunted, and this place was a maw ready to swallow her whole. Facing the wall of mirrors, she braced herself against their cool surfaces. A sickening ripple ran through them, distorting her reflection until she didn't recognize the girl staring back. The eyes grew wide and searching, pleading bloodshot with fear, the white swimming in fear as glimmers danced in a dark abyss behind her. Then it struck her, the shadows thrived on fear. They fed off the torments that played in her mind. Each moment of paralyzing doubt and dread only made them stronger. "Amy, come closer," the voice trailed like smoke, curling around her like a noose. It promised clarity. It promised escape. But at what cost? With a sudden surge of resolve, she took a step back instead of forward. The laughter returned, cruel and mocking, and the shadows writhed in response. Suddenly, a rush of wind swept through the space, blowing cold and strong. The dust hung like spirits in the air, swirling around her, and in that moment, she knew she had to act. Her eyes darted around the room. There had to be something, a tool, a weapon, anything she could use to break free. A glimmer caught her attention near the door she could no longer open. Shards of glass, broken pieces from the once safe neon sign that now flickered erratically above her head, lay strewn across the floor. "Now," she whispered, summoning courage beneath layers of fear. With trembling hands, she picked up a shard, its jagged edges gleaming under the dim light. The shadows recoiled as she raised it, their whispers stammering, fear threading through their ominous tones. "Stay back," she warned, the shard quivering in her grip. "I want to let you take me." But the shadows only laughed, a dark sound that echoed off the warehouse walls. "You're part of us now, Amy. You belong here." She felt the weight of despair clawing at her throat, but she couldn't back down now. As she peered into the mirror once more, something strange began to happen. The surface distorted, revealing fleeting glimpses, faces like hers, lost souls trapped forever beneath the glass. She understood. She wasn't the first. She stepped back, eyes darting. "I want to join you." Suddenly, an unseen force shoved her forward, slamming her against the mirror. Pain shot through her as the shard fell from her hands. The glass rippled in response, the faces behind it pressing outward, yearning for the freedom she had. They were claustrophobic shadows. "No. No!" she screamed, thrashing against the invisible bonds that held her firm. Whatever held her wanted one thing, her surrender. In that moment, she saw something in the reflective surface. A hint of light. Perhaps it was a way out. Hope surged through her veins, and she thrashed again. If she could just reach it. As she focused on the light, the door behind her creaked open just a fraction. Hope flickered. Her heart raced. Could she make it? But the shadows shrieked their fury, the voices blending into a blood-curdling roar. The world around her spun, brightened and darkened again and again, until she felt dizzy with despair and promise. "Run!" she cried, her voice rabbit-quick and desperate. Would she choose the light that glimmered with potential salvation, or surrender to the sinister embrace that beckoned her with familiar deceit? The light flickered as the shadows lunged, and with everything in her, she lunged toward the opening. But the truth awaited as the world dissolved around her. Amy's body collided with a rush, a cold gust that felt like fingers clawing at her skin. The world around her twisted into a blur of shadows and light, each color melting into the next. She was suspended, her scream echoing in her own ears as she plummeted into a void. Then, suddenly, she landed hard against the warehouse floor, the impact jolting her senses awake. Gasping for air, she pushed herself up, her palms stinging against the rough concrete. The familiar warehouse, dim and threatening, loomed around her like a predator. She was sprawled in what appeared to be an abandoned office. Desks were overturned, papers scattered like fallen leaves. The air stood heavy with the smell of dust and despair. But she didn't have time to investigate. She could feel it, those voracious shadows hungered for her still. Moving instinctively, Amy picked herself up and sprinted toward the flickering light from a lone bulb overhead, its dying glow illuminating the chaos. Shadows gnawed at the edges of her vision, whispering sweet promises of acceptance and safety. "You can't escape us," they hissed, and with every step, she felt their pull grow stronger. As she reached the doorway, she hesitated, glancing back over her shoulder. The office seemed to throb, as if alive with recollections of its former life. Echoes of laughter childlike and innocent drifted through the stale air. How could a place like this still hold remnants of joy? Just a little closer the voices wove around her, caressing her ears, trying to cut through her resolve. She pressed her hands to her temples, fighting a tide of despair. Think. A memory flickered in her mind. Marco had told her about the control room where the security monitors lived. If she could just get there, maybe she could figure out what was happening. Maybe she could find a way to fight back. Fueled by desperation, she dashed through the twisting maze of the warehouse, racks and crates looming like giants ready to pounce. She reached rooms filled with shadows that writhed against the wall. In one corner, a scattering of tools caught her eye: wrenches and hammers, gleaming faintly. She snatched a hammer, clutching it tight. Her breath quickened as she pressed forward, the dim hallway stretching out before her. Every fiber of her being screamed for escape, yet lurking beneath was an insidious temptation to surrender to the dark, to let go of her fears. "You're stronger than this," she whispered fiercely to herself, pounding her heart with an iron fist of determination. Finally, she reached the control room, a small glass enclosure cluttered with monitors displaying different angles of the warehouse. It was an armoire of fear, showing her the movements of shadows, but also flickers of light, of hope. She fumbled for the switches, her hands shaking. Could she turn the tide? But as she flipped them, the screens flickered to life, and what she saw sent a chill rushing down her spine. Faces appeared, each one a ghost of someone who hadn't escaped, trapped in the very walls that lived and breathed around her. They reached for her through the glass, mouthing silent screams. "What are you?" she cried out, backing away. "They are us," echoed a voice, close and intimate, wrapping around her like a snake. "You're one of us now." Panic surged, the shadows gathering again, swarming with intent. The room became a storm of swirling darkness, and she felt their icy tendrils brush against her skin, pulling her toward its insatiable maw. Just as she thought she would be consumed, a fleeting vision struck her. A plan. She dropped the hammer and rushed to the window, grabbing a glass panel. This ends now. But lurking beneath her sudden courage was a paralyzing fear. Would her plan work? Could she truly fight these shadows and survive? With trembling steps, Amy prepared to make her stand among the evil that had claimed so many. Would she reclaim her freedom, or would the darkness claim her body and soul? She threw the glass panel against the controls with a desperate scream. The shattering sound sent shards flying like sharp stars through the darkness, glinting briefly before they disappeared. The monitors flickered again, chaos and color intermingling into confusion, but one image remained steady: a single face, twisted with torment, pressed against the screen. He looked so familiar. Amy, the figure rasped, a voice she recognized. It was Marco. "You have to go back. They're coming." A shockwave of dread pulsed through her, echoing with her racing heartbeat. "Marco!" she yelled, reaching as if it could pull him through the glass. But the shadows were relentless, surging closer with an angry hiss, writhing like snakes poised to strike. The air thickened with despair, each second stretching into eternity as she felt their presence looming, urging her to give in. "Join us," they whispered. "It's easier to surrender." "No." she shouted back, her voice fierce. "I want to let you take me." She needed to think. Her options were dwindling, each heartbeat seemed like a countdown. The floor vibrated with an otherworldly thrum, and she stumbled back, sadness settling in her gut with a heaviness that threatened to crush her. What could she possibly do? The faces on the monitors receded, fading into shadows as Marco's expression grew more severe. "The secret," he insisted, desperation etched on his face. "Find the heart." Heart? She was confused, but as she looked around the control room, something glinted in the corner: a small, black box beneath a pile of cracked wires. With urgency converging on her, she dove for it, shoving aside the debris as the whispers reached a fever pitch. "You'll never find it," they taunted. Articulating each movement in panic, she pulled out the box and saw that it had a single red button on top. The shadows coiled tighter, a vice of terror wrapping around her as she pressed it down. Immediately, the walls trembled, and the ground rumbled like a hungry beast awakening. Suddenly, the monitors erupted with blinding light, and screams filled the air, horrific echoes of the trapped souls. It was the darkness retaliating. Dark tendrils lashed out, seeking to tighten their grip on her vulnerable body. She felt their icy breath creeping closer. It was suffocating, choking her resolve. "No. I will not be one of you," she cried, channeling her fear into strength. With adrenaline pumping, Amy grasped the hammer she had dropped earlier and swung it at the nearest shadow. The impact tore through the murky darkness, and she glimpsed flares of light, faces shattered into pieces that vanished instead of being absorbed. The shadows howled in rage as she broke their hold, striking out wildly at the tendrils reaching for her. Each hit sent ripples of light cascading through the room, and she felt empowered, driven by the hope of survival, but the ground cracked again, splitting beneath her feet. She stumbled, grasping at the control panel for support. "You will pay," a voice roared, vibrating through her bones. It was the embodiment of the darkness, furious to be losing its hold. With a final surge of determination, she whipped around to face the swirling shadows. "You want me? Come and get me!" Amy shouted, even as the fear threatened to overtake her again. The shadows roared, lunging toward her, the sound chilling her blood. Just as they closed in, the lights exploded into brilliance. Would the light consume the darkness, or would it merely be a distraction, luring her deeper into its web? With all her strength, she braced herself for whatever came next. She heard Marco's voice again, clearer now. "The heart is within, the heart is the key." The darkness writhed in fury, and her heart raced. What did that mean? What did the heart refer to? As she stood there, the shadows swirling, she realized this fight was far from over. How would she unleash the heart, or would the darkness finally claim her? The shadows clawed at the air, thick and suffocating. Amy's heart hammered like a trapped bird, each beat a frantic plea for survival. She pushed her back against the control panel, steadying herself as she scanned the chaos that stretched before her. The monitors buzzed violently, flickering images of agony blending with the dark tendrils that slashed toward her. "Find the heart," the phrase echoed in her mind, a relentless mantra. What did it mean? Fear clawed at her throat as she searched the room, everything now a twisting labyrinth of horror. She had to as she crouched low, shards from the shattered glass panel glimmered like teeth scattered on the floor. She picked one up, a jagged piece reflecting the chaos around her. "Some kind of weapon," she whispered, breathing heavily. The shadows roiled, sensing her shift in focus, and their low murmurs intensified, becoming a banshee scream. "Foolish girl! You can't escape!" They shrieked, voices layering upon each other like a chorus of the damned. Ignoring their taunts, Amy rose slowly, the makeshift weapon gripped tightly in her trembling hand. "I'm not done yet." She could feel the whispers stinging her skin, taunting her resolve. Where would the heart be? She closed her eyes, using the leftover courage to block the dread that clung to her. Images of Marco flashed his worried face, the urgency in his voice. The heart, it must be something vital, something within her reach. Her gaze fell on the flickering monitors again. Was it a place? A pulse? A memory? The whispers morphed into a cacophony of laughter, pushing her further into despair. She steeled herself, she couldn't afford to let them break her. Suddenly, she remembered the stories Marco told about the warehouse. The old legends whispered of a heart locked deep in its floors, the remnants of a past tragedy buried beneath. Could this place be the source of the darkness? She dashed toward the nearest monitor, the flickering light casting sinister shadows on her face. The heart. Where is it? She screamed at the screen, her voice quivering with desperation. The screen glitched, and for a brief moment, the chaos cleared to reveal a glowing symbol, a pulsating heart-shaped emblem etched into the floor beneath her. It pulsed rhythmically like a beacon of hope. Was it guiding her? It had to be. Underneath, she muttered, scrambling back toward the cracked floor. The shadows roared louder, furious at her discovery. The walls vibrated, cracking and groaning under the pressure of the chaos, and Amy felt the ground shift beneath her feet. No. No. The darkness surged, a tidal wave of black threatening her every escape. She dropped the shard and knelt, frantically brushing debris and dust away. The heart symbol glowed brighter, as if it could sense her desperation. If Marco was right, if the heart was the key, then she had to find it now, yet the shadows closed in, their icy tendrils grazing her skin. Just as she thought she would be enveloped, she struck the ground with her fists, determined to dig deeper. "I will find you," she shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. A wall of shadow surged forward, but she managed to pry loose a piece of the floor. The darkness recoiled, a sudden wave of retreat as if stung by her defiance. Beneath the surface, a faint red glow pulsed, illuminating her trembling fingers. But then, a deep, chilling voice filled the room, a booming laugh that echoed through the darkness. "You will never uncover the truth. Not now, not ever." Her heart raced. What had she uncovered? Did she dare to dig deeper? The light flickered, the ground lurching beneath her like a living thing. Would the heart lead her to salvation, or was it a trap designed to lure her closer to despair? Taking a deep breath, Amy steeled herself. She had to know. Just as she was about to plunge her hands back into the opening, the shadows surged again with an unparalleled fury, threatening to pull her into their abyss. "What are you hiding?" The pulsing glow beneath her seemed to sync with her heartbeat, and without thinking, she plunged her hands deep into the fracture. Would she find the heart, or lose herself forever in the darkness? Amy's fingers plunged into the jagged crevice, and the moment she made contact with the red glow, a violent shudder raced through her body. The pulsing light flared, washing over her in an urgent hue that felt both warm and agonizing, as though it was drawing from her very essence. "Give in!" The shadows roared, clawing at her hair and face, the whispers binding her in chains of dread. She gritted her teeth, pushing deeper, her heart pounding like a war drum. If the heart was here, she had to find it. With her hands still buried in the grime, she felt something cold and smooth, nestled within the dirt. It twisted free, a small, red object that beat with a rhythm against her palm. A heart. But it wasn't just any heart, it pulsed with a life of its own. Green veins shot through its core, throbbing like a drum demanding to be heard. The shadows shrieked louder, reverberating off the walls. "You dare take it? You will pay for your insolence." The cold tendrils flared, wrapping around her wrists, squeezing tighter until she saw spots dance before her eyes. "No!" she screamed, yanking her hands out of the fissure. The heart slipped from her grip, landing on the cracked floor, and rolled a few inches before coming to a halt. For a heartbeat, everything stood still. The shadows hesitated, their grasp slackening, revealing her surroundings once more. She breathed heavily, thoughts racing like lightning. Could this thing truly be the heart? What could it do? Panic twisted her stomach. You couldn't keep something so vital without a price. Glancing up, she noticed the monitors flickering again, each showcasing scenes of despair, shadows clawing at figures, screaming faces contorted in anguish. The room distorted around her, mirrors reflecting chaos back on itself, revealing 1,000 versions of her own terror. "What do I do?" she whispered. Just then, the symbols on the floor began to glow in rhythm with the heart, and her heartbeat synced with them, a frantic tempo echoing despair in every beat. "Claim it!" A voice hissed from the shadows, seductive and sinister. "Become it!" Grabbing the heart once more, she felt the warmth seep into her fingers. There was power, a dark, undiscovered strength coursing through her, intertwining with her fear, but also a point of hope. Images of Marco flashed in her mind again, urging her forward. Suddenly, the shadows lunged, a wave of black fury crashing toward her. She stumbled back, heart racing, grasping the heart tightly as she turned toward the exit. "I want to let you take me," she yelled, holding the heart up like a shield. The shadows shrieked even louder, frantically retreating at the sight of the glowing heart. Great tendrils lashed out, but each time they neared the light, they recoiled, burning like moths drawn to a flame. "I can break this curse," she shouted, emboldened by the heart's power. Each step left glowing footprints behind her, illuminating a path out of the descent into madness. But celebrating her small victory ignited a fierce roar within the dark, an anger so palpable it felt almost sentient. "You think you've won?" It mocked her, a deep echo reverberating in her bones. "You have only scratched the surface." The ground quaked beneath her, and cracks spread farther across the floor like a web betraying her fragile bravery. Her legs churned, propelled by a frantic instinct that pushed her to keep moving. As she neared the entrance, the shadows surged back with renewed fury, pulling her down into the depths. "You need to surrender. Join us." Their cries echoed, twisting the air, wrapping her in despair. "No," she shouted, heart pounding in her ears. In a final, desperate act, she swung the heart in front of her. Would it hold? Could she trap the shadows with it? All hope hung on this moment, but just before she launched it forward, the world froze, and a piercing scream cut through the air. It was Marco's voice, echoing like a siren call. "Amy." Her heart twisted in recognition, and she hesitated, torn between the darkness pulling her in and the bright pulse of the heart in her hand. What had she unleashed? What lay beyond the threshold of her choice? She stood on the brink. Would she embrace the light, or surrender to the madness? As the shadows lunged at her again, the heart pulsed ominously. A decision loomed, heavy and viscous. What path would she carve through the chaos? The moment stretched, the darkness creeping closer, unsatisfied, hungry for her. Time slowed, like molasses in cold December. Amy felt the heart's warmth radiate against her palm, that rhythmic, insistent thump urging her forward. But Marco's voice, echoing through the void, pulled at her soul. "Amy." The name rang like a bell, hollow yet resonant. The shadows writhed, their fury palpable. They stopped, retreating just enough, hesitant at the signs of rebellion. The heart quivered in her grasp, a desperate pulse urging her to decide, to act. "Marco," she breathed out. But the weight of the shadows pressed against her chest, suffocating. "What do I do?" Suddenly, the glowing symbols began to shift, merging into an intricate pattern that she recognized. It was a gateway, a map. If she understood it, there could be a way to seal the shadows or to free Marco. "No." The shadows hissed, furious whispers swirling as they huddled closer, the air thick with dread. "Do not think, girl. Do not hope. Embrace the dark." Tendrils snaked toward her like hungry vipers, and Amy knew she only had moments to act. She could either risk everything on a chance to save Marco or surrender to the encroaching night. Heart racing, she raised the heart higher, channeling its warmth as she concentrated on the symbols, tracing their patterns in her mind. As she focused, the heart amplified the glow, filling the room with fierce, red light. The shadows recoiled momentarily, their cries morphing into something shrill and piercing. She glanced down at the heart. It held secrets, fragments of power. "Find the truth," a voice whispered in her head, a rhythmic urging, similar to the heart's beat. "But beware of the cost." She felt it then, the tug of a choice looming larger than the shadows. She envisioned Marco, lost in the dark, his face twisted with fear. Without thinking, she jumped into the fray. "I choose to save him." The heart pulsed violently in her hand, and at once, shadows spiraled towards her, a wave of agony threatening to engulf her. She cast it forward through the shadows, and the heart flared bright, illuminating fragments of darkness, spreading radiant light like a superhero's power blasting through the night. The tendrils writhed, howling in pain, retreating into the corners of the room, trapped in their own nightmare as the heart forced them back. But as Amy stepped closer to the center of the light, she felt the shadows pull at her feet, threatening to drag her down. "It's not enough," she screamed, panic bubbling in her throat. "You'll take me." But then a surge of fierce resolve coursed through her. I want to let you take him. Images flashed Marco, tangled in shadow. She clung to those fragments, her breath picking up like a drumbeat. She was running on pure adrenaline, each step a desperate plea for salvation. With one last act of courage, she thrust her hand forward, the heart touching the ground with a low thrum. The room shook violently, the very air splitting as a blinding light erupted around her. Was it a trap? The shadows screamed against the brightness, their tortured howls reverberating, threatening to drown out everything, even her own thoughts. Suddenly, silence enveloped her. The world fell eerily still, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Can this really expel them? But as Amy scanned her surroundings, the heart began to weaken, its glow flickering uncertainly. Panic surged once more. How long would this last? She reached out, feeling her heartbeat sink with the fading light. Please, she whispered, a prayer and a command, don't give up on me then. From the thicker darkness, something slithered out, a shadow, more distinct than the others. It twisted and coiled behind her, growing and pulsating, eyes glimmering with malevolent glee. No. What is this? Amy gasped, churning with dread. From the depths came a voice low and mocking, laced with bitter laughter. You think your choice will save him? Your heart is already mine. As the reality of her journey twisted again into terror, she realized all too late that every choice bore a consequence. The pulse of fear danced in her veins, and now, the fight was far from over. With Marco's voice echoing again in her mind, she stood at the precipice of a deeper nightmare, both defiant and terrified of the unknown. What dark truth was still buried amidst the shadows? Would saving Marco cost her more than she had bargained for? The suffocating silence shattered like glass, shards scattering across the room. Amy whipped around, her heart pounding against her ribs, each beat a frantic warning that echoed in the dark. Shadows pulsed with newfound hunger, thrumming like a living storm, eager to consume her entire being. Enough of this! She shouted, voice trembling, but wild determination surged within. I'm not letting you take him. The shadow entity sneered, twisting around her as if savoring her defiance. It leered with those glimmering eyes, darkly amused. Brave fool! You think you've won? You have awakened the true darkness and it hungers. In an instant, the air thickened, choked with a rancid scent of despair. A shroud of oppressive weight pressed down, threatening to smother her resolve. Amy staggered back, feeling panic clawing at her throat. The light from the heart sputtered, dimming as the shadows surged forward, clawing to reclaim their lost territory. Marco! She cried, desperation lacing her voice, fear now a visceral coil wrapping around her very core. Each breath was a struggle, the shadows seemed to intercept her thoughts, whispering promises of surrender, of letting go, but she couldn't. She wouldn't. Images of Marco flickered in her mind, his smile now twisted in agony, and rage ignited within her. No! She roared, clenching her fists around the heart. The pulse surged anew, fueled by her determination, tearing through the suffocating darkness. Stop! The shadow hissed, its voice venomous. You know not what you meddle with. Yes, I do. She shot back, emboldened. With slight pressure, the heart flickered back to life, casting brilliant crimson arcs through the abyss around her. She envisioned a path, a way to release Marco, her mind racing with the intricate symbols that danced in her memory. Revelation or ruin, the entity crooned mockingly. Neither salvation nor freedom comes without sacrifice. What are you talking about? Amy demanded, the weight of the shadows shifting with her words. You won't get anything from me. Oh, but I already have. It hissed forcefully, tendrils whipping around her, tightening like a noose. With every choice, you bleed your essence. You cannot hope to combat darkness with mere thoughts alone. She felt the darkness reaching inside her, probing at her fears, her doubts, pushing against her very soul. I don't care. I'll find a way. She shouted defiantly, her voice cutting through the impending chaos. Just then, a piercing scream echoed, ripping through the night, Marco's voice. Amy's heart sank. It clawed at the walls of her mind. The shadows were twisting their grip, driving her to distraction, manipulating every fear she'd ever buried. Marco. Hold on. I'm coming. But even as she screamed, cracks spread through the barrier of light. They threatened to engulf her in darkness again. She felt the last flicker of hope start to wane. No, not like this, please. In the surging chaos, tendrils began to surface from the growing shadows, squirming closer. She could barely discern the faces forming in the blackness, lost souls merging into one. Eyes mirrored her own terror, the lost ones, the forgotten, all withdrawn into this damned void. No! Amy shouted, fighting against the pull of despair. Each scream, every terrified gaze amplified her urgency. I want to let them take you. But walls were closing in. The shadows were connecting beyond sight, forming a vast mass, thrumming with insatiable hunger. The heart flickered again, a warning pulse beating weakly against the swell of darkness. What do I do? She whispered, desperation swallowing her voice. Then, something deep inside her stirred, the truth revealed in her mind, echoing through her heart. The symbols. The map. Her gaze widened. She could fight back, she realized. But would it save Marco or destroy them both in the process? And from the crushing darkness came another chilling laugh, one that promised there was still more to reveal. In a game of shadows, do you know what you must sacrifice? Terror gripped her. As the shadows twisted and merged, revealing grotesque forms. Between the spaces, Amy felt an icy dread settle in the pit of her stomach. What was the price she would have to pay? Would it be worth it, standing on the brink of the abyss, ready to risk everything for Marco, or would sacrifice lead her to a fate worse than the shadow's grasp? The oppressive stillness swallowed Amy whole as the shadows writhed and pulsed around her, hungry for despair, each whisper a reminder of her choices. She could feel the malevolence surrounding her, its breath hot against her skin, urging her to submit, to give in. But amidst the panic and despair, a fierce determination ignited within her. I will find a way. She yelled defiantly, gripping the pulsing heart tightly. That heartbeat was no longer just a symbol of fear. It was a beacon of hope, a reminder of her love for Marco, the bond that stretched across the darkness. With every ounce of energy, she focused on the heart, feeling its warmth seep into her veins, coursing with empowerment. She could harness this energy, but she needed to confront the darkness head-on. Drawing a deep breath, Amy steadied herself. I want to let you take him. She shouted, forcing the shadows back with the intensity of her resolve. The heart pulsed brighter, illuminating the darkness around her in fierce red waves. The air thickened with energy, crackling like a storm cloud ready to burst. Do you really think you can save him? The shadow entity mocked, the voice curling around her like a serpent. You are but a flicker in the void. Reality slipped again as the shadows swelled, coiling closer, seeking to reclaim their hold. But Amy's heart raced fiercely. She envisioned Marco's face, pure and untainted by the dark, his hope, his love. I believe in us. She cried, letting the heart's warmth radiate from her like a force field. The shadows recoiled at her declaration, their malice tangling with fear. She surged forward, channeling the glowing heart, pressing through the thrumming darkness. Each step illuminated fragments of the shadow realm, revealing the tormented souls trapped within, yearning, pleading. I will not let you stay bound. She yelled, thrusting the heart ahead of her like a torch, illuminating the contours of despair. The heart throbbed with power, brighter with every promise made in her heart, feeding on hope, nurturing courage. The shadows shrieked, an unsettling chorus of agony and rage echoing in the vastness, but as she pushed deeper, the air thickened again, the embodiment of darkness materialized, swirling around her, its posture menacing, eyes gleaming. You think you understand hope? It hissed, only sacrifice will lead to freedom. That's not true. Amy shouted back, her voice steady even as her heart trembled. What did she need to let go of? You'll never escape. The shadows screamed, and in that fleeting moment, a realization bloomed. The heart, a talisman of power, was also a tether. What was the cost of her victory? Memories flooded her mind of laughter shared with Marco, evenings spent planning their future. I won't give up what I love, she resolved, and with each step, she could feel the shadows pulling back, wailing in protest. Find the heart, Marco's voice echoed in the void, resonating with familiarity, filling her with resolve. The heart pulsed with life, and she saw a path clearing before her, one that spiraled toward the center of the chaos. The swirling darkness began to fragment, breaking under the power of her determination. She could see Marco now, a faint outline imprisoned within the shifting shadows, his figure clouded with fear yet flickering with a light that mirrored her own. I'm coming for you, she called, the urgency in her tone pulling her forward. As Amy pushed through the final barrier of shadows, the entity lunged, wrapping tendrils around her, constricting her ability to move. You're too late. It screeched, threatening to reclaim her, but with one final surge, Amy raised the heart, aimed it at the entity, and screamed, You will not take me. You may have taken others, but you will not take me. The heart blazed in response, thrumming with fury, defying the darkness. A pulse ricocheted through the warehouse, and the walls trembled. A crack shot through the darkness, splintering it into shards of shadow that flitted away, howling in rage. No. The shadows shrieked, but the heart thrummed louder, a victor's anthem. Resonating in the air. Colors exploded around her, brightening with each beat, a tapestry of hope woven through despair. The shadows withdrew, and in their retreat, Amy felt Marco's presence grow more tangible. Amy. You did it. His face emerged, fear replaced by awe, radiant with hope. She reached out, fingers trembling, as he clawed his way through the remaining darkness. Together, she urged, her heart reconnecting with the vivid soul she had fought for, and as his hand slipped into hers, the light enveloped them both, swirling, lifting. The dark entity roared one final time, and then the world shimmered, transforming into a brilliant expanse of white and warmth. They emerged into the light, the shadows banished behind them. The warehouse, that dark labyrinth filled with echoes of suffering, fell silent. They stood together, breathless but unharmed, a gentle warmth wrapping around them. We did it, Marco whispered, his voice trembling with relief. Amy smiled, a weight lifting from her chest. No more darkness, she breathed. They turned to exit the warehouse, but the scars of their battle lingered in their hearts, a reminder that while darkness would always exist, so would the light that came from love and unwavering courage. Together, they stepped forward, ready to reclaim their lives, forging ahead into a brighter, bolder future. As they walked into the sunlight, invigorated and united, the past loomed behind them like a shadow, but this time, it was powerless to ensnare them. Thank you for joining Amy and Marco on this spine-tingling journey. Remember, you need to subscribe now so you don't miss exclusive stories just like this one. Now's the moment to show your support. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help us grow. What did you think about the twists and turns of this ending? Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about Amy and Marco's journey, and don't wait even one more second. Instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Let us keep the adventure alive.